Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry we're having a late start, but we were waiting for a quorum to appear, and Dr. Burke and Dr. Parker are now with us at their location. So I will call the meeting to order for the Legislative Committee, and we will begin with our updates from our consultants. First, we'll start with Mark Kadish at Kadish and Associates for a federal update on anything new since their report was written. And Mark, are you on the line? Good morning.
I am. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll just give two brief updates. One actually will underscore our written report that I'll just highlight for you that last month the 2018 omnibus spending bill was passed, and two areas that you may want to note are that the DERA program got an increase to $75 million, and the Targeted Airshed Grant program received $40 million. So that also was up. And, of course, the written report goes through some other issues that we've been following and that were included in the omnibus. The second thing I just briefly wanted to touch on that is new, I'm sure you've all been following this in the press, but today the Environmental Protection Agency, US EPA, filed its Federal Register notice. It's determined that the greenhouse gas emission standards for model year 2022 to 2025 for light-duty vehicle trucks are not appropriate and should be revised. So they're essentially going after the CAFE standards and talking about changing them, and we'll start a new rulemaking process on that. Obviously, this also has some implications for the California waiver, since under the Clean Air Act we're able to set our own standards. We, along with the other consultant groups, have been working with your executive committee, your executive team, to address this and start notifying our delegation of the potential implications of a change in the CAFE standards for light-duty vehicles to Southern California. So we'll continue to monitor the situation and work with Wayne, Derek, Lisa, and their teams to keep everyone up to date.
Great.
That's my report.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, we've been following that pretty closely, what's happening with the CAFE standards. So thank you for working on that with us. Any questions for Mr. Kadish from our committee members? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Carmen Group. And Gary Heitzman. Good morning, Gary. Would you please give us an update on your report?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Just three quick items of note here. The Senate yesterday confirmed Andrew Wheeler as Deputy Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. The vote was 53 to 45. He'd been in limbo for most of a year, and his appointment finally was confirmed yesterday. Andrew is probably known to a number of you out there. I've known Andrew since the late 90s when we were colleagues with Senator Inhofe's office. He had been the staff director of the Environmental and Public Works Committee on the Senate side. I would characterize him as a good guy and someone willing to listen. Let's put it that way. That he's willing to compromise and listen. So look forward to him in that position. Secondly, I'd like to point out another appointment of significance at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, an agency within the Department of Transportation that is going to be part of the discussions on the emission standards that Mark was just talking about. President just named Heidi King to be administrator of that agency. She'll have to go through a confirmation process. Just to note her background, having been with the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where she was actively involved in the CAFE issue some years ago. She also worked at the Office of Management and Budget. Also note she has a degree from Caltech, University of California at Irvine. Also served as a California Park Ranger. Just thought I'd note that. And
That's good.
thirdly, the other significant item on my list for you today is a memorandum from the president issued yesterday, and just still trying to digest it. But it's significant in that he's directing the administrator of EPA to reform the National Ambient Air Quality Standards Program in a way to make it more efficient and cost-effective. And it's something I think the agency should take a look at as it is implemented. I think the administrator will probably come out with various things about that. I guess the point of it is to, as it's described, is to make things more transparent and to have reforms that are aimed at reducing lengthy permitting delays on projects and things like that. He's looking to expedite the approvals of state implementation plans and things like that. So those are my significant updates this morning. I'll leave it there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary. And as you get more information on the President's announcements this morning, please keep us informed. Any questions?
Yeah, I will. I'll do a write-up on it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Any committee members have any questions for Mr. Hoitzman? Seeing none, we will move on to Cassidy and Associates, and we have Caleb Bullock with us this morning. Caleb, good morning.
Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark and Gary covered most of our update. There's a couple items that we want to mention very quickly. First is that the President has also been in the press recently regarding a rescissions package that is being put together by the President and the Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney. They are targeting up to $60 billion from the omnibus package that was recently passed by Congress, potentially slashing also foreign aid and non-discretionary domestic programs. The target date for the release of that package from the White House is the first week of May 1st. We will be monitoring that very closely to see if any programs of interest for South Coast will be included in the proposed rescissions package. It is worth noting, though, that congressional leaders have been somewhat pessimistic on the likelihood of that passing through Congress, but it'll be important to note what is in that package being targeted by the administration. The second small update is just that we saw that the EPA has granted 3 Southern California tribes approval to implement water and air programs under the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act. Those are the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in Riverside, California, as well as some in San Diego. So we will just monitor those approvals and get more information to the South Coast staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bullock? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to updates from our state consultants. And first we have Paul Gonzalez from Gonzalez & Sons. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I just wanted to give one brief, quick update on a bill we've been working on behalf of the district, AB 2548 by Assemblywoman Friedman. This is a commuter benefit program bill, which establishes and provides for MTA to establish a commuter benefit program. This bill originally referenced the district for the creation and administration of the program, and the bill had a direct conflict with the District Rule 2202. So we worked closely with the author's office and provided them with amendments that removed South Coast from the bill and ensured that any commuter benefit program created by the bill doesn't conflict with or overlap our rules. So I'm happy to say that yesterday AB 2548 was amended and it includes all of our amendments that we requested in the bill. So we will continue to monitor this bill as it moves through the process and continue to keep district staff informed of any changes. And that's it for my my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good. Thank you very much, Paul, for your work on that. We've been watching it. Any questions for Paul Gonzalez from our committee? Seeing none. We'll move on to the Quintana Cruise Company, and we have, I believe she's new to us, Roxy Beck Mohammadi. And so it's quite a long last name, but I think we got it right. I'm getting coached here. Roxy Beck Mohammadi. So, Ms. Beck Mohammadi, please go ahead. Good morning.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yes, you said it perfectly well. I am new to the Quintana Cruise Company, so if it would be helpful to you, I would love to just give you a really brief introduction about who I am and my background.
Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So I was raised in Los Angeles, and so I grew up in the Basin. And so I'm a little atypical in the sense that I actually have an engineering background. I received a BS in chemical engineering from UCLA and a master's in environmental engineering from UC Irvine. And I actually worked as a graduate researcher with the National Fuel Cell Research Center on a South Coast funded project at the Orange County Sanitation District. And then I spent 3 years at ARB working on light and heavy duty zero emission vehicles as well as the truck and bus rule. So I'm really excited and very proud to serve South Coast Air Quality Management District, and I really look forward to fighting relentlessly for your legislative goals. So I'll go into our update. I would specifically want to update you on two bills. First, we're tracking Assembly Bill 2506, which is authored by Assemblymember Burke, which requires that at least 30% of newly purchased vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating of 19,000 pounds or more, purchased by DGS and other state entities starting January 2020, would be enacted. So we actually met with Assembly Burke's office this week with the executive officer as well as the rest of the South Coast delegation. And the Assembly member has agreed to amend the bill to define near zero emission vehicles slightly differently to ensure that near zero emission vehicles meet or emits less than optional low NOx emission standards set right now. ARB has also weighed in on the definition slightly. We're in the middle of finalizing that language, and we believe that we'll be moving forward favorably, although there is currently some pushback from DGS. However, the author's office will be reaching out to the governor's office to encourage the governor to ensure DGS is much more supportive of this bill. The second bill that we're working on is, and South Coast is sponsoring, is Assembly Bill 327, authored by Assemblymember Gibson, which is the public fleet rule that was last seen last year as AB 302. We met with them as well, with the delegation, and we have finalized what language we're going to move forward with, and we are in the midst of already developing some support, as well as, negotiating with the California Truckers Association. That's my update. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none here, we will move on to California Advisors, that consultant group, and we have Jacob Moss on the line with us this morning. Good morning, Mr. Moss.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. For the time to give an update, I will attempt to keep this brief, but I wanted to chat a little bit about the round of meetings we had earlier this week that I think were generally positive meetings. Wayne Mastry and various folks from South Coast Air District, Barbara Baird, were in town, and we had basically 3 days of meetings. We met with a number of members and key staff and officers, including the governor's office, pro tem staff, speaker staff, the various members who are in our district, who share their districts, are all or partly within South Coast Air District, and then some key chairs of certain committees. And the primary thrust of our conversations were about AB 617 implementation funding and the need for incentives in this year's budget to mitigate air quality. As we all know, the need is pretty big. It's about $1 billion a year per our last AQMD. So we talked a little bit about that, but one of the most sort of concerning issues that we were really was the core of our conversations was the fact that in this year's budget there was no money set aside appropriated for air districts to implement AB 617. And for those who may not remember AB 617, I have a hard time believing anyone can't remember that, but CARB is directed by October 1st, 2018 to prepare a statewide strategy to reduce air toxics and criteria pollutants. And what's unfortunate about that is that this plan can direct air districts to, and expend the money to develop these community air monitoring programs. And while these programs are fantastic in the intent and the results and what they're going to do for the communities are critical and why we all do this, the funding source is as yet undefined. So we are fighting for those dollars. We think we're making progress, but we, as of now, do not have a commitment from any of the key offices. So we are not going to let up. We are seeing finally some discussion about sources of funding and some acknowledgement from certain folks that, yes, this money needs to come from the state, which is sort of a new acknowledgement just as of this week. So we hope to see in this year's May revise, which come out sometime the second week of May, see line item for air districts for AB 617 implementation. But we will keep you updated, and we will not stop pushing on this. And that's my update.
Thank you very much. Yes, tasked with a big job under AB 617, but no money to do it. So we have money for this year, for which we're very thankful, but it's an ongoing program, so we need ongoing source of funding for that. So thank you for that, and thank you for your work on that. So I guess we will keep working on that to see if we can't find some ongoing sources of funding. Any questions for Mr. Moss from our committee members? Yeah, seeing none, thank you very much. And we can move on to the rest of our agenda at this time. So we will go on with action on our state bills. And the first one of those is AB 2091, and by Grayson as the author, and I believe Philip is going to present on this. This deals with fire prevention.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. This bill would add the word prevention to the name of the State Board of Forestry and Fire Prevention and Protection, require at least one board member to be selected with a background in fire prevention, including prescribed fire, and require the board to appoint a prescribed fire advisory committee, including a local air district representative. Overall, this bill could have a positive effect on reducing air pollution within the South Coast by facilitating the use of controlled burns to reduce wildfires and reduce the resulting severe air pollution. However, also, staff recommends that amendments to the bill be added that address an issue that complicates the granting of controlled burn permits at the local level. Current law only allows an air pollution control officer to permit controlled burns in counties with a population of 6 million or less. That provision complicates AQMD's ability to issue controlled burn permits for fire hazard mitigation within LA County, which of course has a population that far exceeds 6 million. Staff proposes an addition to the bill that would remove current law's restriction with regard to county population so that AQMD can have clear authority to issue the controlled burn permits within LA County. And also staff recommends amendments that ensure that this bill does not restrict a landowner's ability to obtain a burn permit from a local air district. Overall, is a support with amendments position recommended by staff.
Thank you. Any questions? So I did ask a question. Go
I
ahead.
have one question.
Yes, Dr. Parker, please go
We
ahead.
don't have any, do we have, probably I should preference it. When I went up once to a committee meeting, not a committee meeting, but a meeting of one of the state boards, we were in a county north of Sacramento, and I noticed that they were burning. So I asked the driver, the taxi driver, he says, oh no, we have these controlled burns every so often in order to make sure that our forest doesn't get out of control, et cetera. Do we have the same kind of thing going on, do you know, in Los Angeles, in Orange and Riverside and San Bernardino counties? Because we have a lot of forest fires here that seem to get completely out of control.
Yes, we do.
The answer is yes. Dr. Parker.
Okay. And what will this do in addition to what we already have then?
So,
This bill?
Dr. Parker, this is David DeBoer. We have an open burn program here at the South Coast SCAQMD relative to Rule 444, which is open burning. And we work closely with the USFS, CAL FIRE, and various other fire agencies to issue smoke management plans. These particular smoke management plans then allow these agencies to conduct prescribed open burns. What this would allow us to do is we've been approached by several agencies such as the USFS, and they have asked to use air curtain incinerators in lieu of actually doing open burning on the ground, how they do it now, or they do what they call broadcast burns. And so in utilizing these air curtain incinerators, we would have to permit those units. So if we were to do that and we would issue what we're referring to as a general Title V permit to allow the use of these air curtain incinerators, we could not do that in the Los Angeles County because of this provision in the code. So by revising that provision, we could then go ahead and permit those air curtain incinerators.
So this would basically allow us to put in certain controls that we're not allowed right now under the law. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, LA County is the only county in the whole state that has more than 6 million residents, population-wise.
Okay. So it would only be affecting us then, is what you're saying, right?
Los Angeles County, that's correct.
So the other item is, the other amendment that we're asking about is for a landowner's ability to get a burn permit from any local air district. What is the situation right now with respect to getting a permit? From whom do they get the permit?
well, one thing that's mentioned in the current language of the bill is basically to confirm that this bill does not restrict the landowner to get a permit from CARB, from the state board. So this was also just to clarify that it would also not restrict from a local air district as well. That was just a parity type of provision to add to the bill.
So they can get permits from CARB or from a local air district, either.
Correct.
Either agency can issue a permit, and that this amendment would
just clarify that.
Clarify that. Okay. Any other questions from committee members on this? Then the support, the staff has asked us to support this with the proposed amendments, and I'd be looking for a motion at this time to for action on this particular bill.
I'll move the item as staff has recommended.
Is there a second? All right, I will second the motion. And see.
Second.
Is there a second from Dr.
Second.
Thank you. We didn't hear it here. I'm so sorry. And we
just wake me up. I'm okay.
Okay, good. Get some of that coffee. So we will need a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Burke?
Yes. Yes.
Dr. Parker?
You said yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Supervisor Rutherford?
Sure, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. The next bill that we're considering this morning is AB 2453 by Eduardo Garcia. This deals with air pollution filters in schools, and Philip is going to report on this.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Thank you. This bill would authorize modernization grants from state school facility bond funds to be used to limit pupil exposure to harmful air pollutants by updating air filtration systems. It would also provide that schools located in communities with facilities identified under AB 617 as toxic sources may work with air districts to identify school sites for air quality adaptation efforts. And also, it would provide that schools located near a facility designated by an air district as a high priority category may be eligible for grants as part of a community emission reduction program adopted per AB 617. So this bill's goals of reducing air pollution and negative health impacts on students on school campuses in disproportionately impacted communities is in line, of course, with AQMD's goals of reducing air pollution and protecting public health within South Coast, and particularly within disadvantaged communities. Staff recommends working with the author to identify more effective ways to implement air pollution mitigation efforts on impacted school campuses. Also, staff recommends amending the language to allow that modernization apportionments should be used for the installation of air filtration systems. The staff further recommends clarifying that this bill would not limit air districts' discretion in developing and implementing community emission reduction programs. And finally, staff recommends clarifying what types of grant funding sources would be applicable for funding for the air pollution mitigation efforts that are sought in this bill, particularly because AB 617 does not provide funding for grants as part of the community emission reduction programs. So that's overall staff recommends a support with amendments position on the bill.
Thank you. Any questions on this bill? So as I understand it, Philip, since we don't have 617 funding, we need to keep looking for the funding. So this is providing how to use the money. It's just we don't have the money.
Right.
So.
And this bill, I think, is focused on, I spoke with the author's office, it was focused on authorizing and kind of trying to work together to provide some priority, find some funding for the schools, but it's a flexible bill. It's not requiring things at this point. So it would be a good opportunity to work with the author to see if we can find a common ground there.
Okay, good. I know that from our experience in Paramount that there are schools located to some of these toxic sources, and that has been a big concern as I've spoken with community people who are involved in the school system there. So I think we do need to be addressing that issue. Any questions from committee members? I think I asked that already, and I didn't see any. But the recommended position on this is to support with the amendments that the staff has set forth. Do I have a motion for action on this bill?
I'll move the item. Second.
Well, good. We have a motion to support staff recommendation from Dr. Parker, a second from Dr. Burke. And so please call the roll.
Dr. Burke?
Aye.
Sorry, yeah.
Dr. Parker?
Aye. You had your Wi-Fi turned off.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. The next bill is SB 210, authored by Livia.
Senator Conley-Leyva.
Leva. That's how you say it.
Leyva.
Leva. Okay, Leva. And Philip is going to report on this one.
Yes. So this bill would authorize CARB to develop and implement a heavy-duty vehicle inspection and maintenance program for non-gasoline heavy-duty on-road vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 14,000 pounds, including but not limited to single vehicle fleets and other vehicles that are registered in another state and operate in California. It would also allow CARB in implementing the program to establish test procedures for different motor vehicle model years and emission control technologies that measure the effectiveness of the controls on NOx emissions, particulate matter, and greenhouse gases, and require that motor vehicles are required to pass the test procedures in order to register or operate within the state, and finally authorize CARB to assess fees and penalties as part of the program. So this bill states that the program shall be developed in partnership between affected state agencies, the public, industry, and other stakeholders, and is intended to be developed in a way that minimizes costs to truck owners and fleets, provides a level playing field for the industry through effective enforcement, and provides flexibility for the program to adapt as truck technology evolves. So this bill is aligned with SCAQMD's priorities to reduce criteria pollutant and toxic emissions, to protect public health within the South Coast, particularly by reducing mobile source emission pollution, and also to help promote the increased production and use of near zero and zero emission heavy duty vehicles within the South Coast that would of course support the 2016 AQMP and facilitate attainment of federal air quality standards. So staff recommends a support position on this bill.
Any questions? Supervisor Rutherford, please go ahead.
I'm curious. I hear the language that the idea is not to affect small fleet owners, but out in our area we've got a lot of individuals and families that are operating with 1 to 5 trucks. What specific language or in discussions with the authors are intended to make sure there aren't negative consequences on their ability to make a living?
Well, the first part would be that this is, in a sense, an authorization bill for CARB to begin a rulemaking. So the presumption would be that they would be working with stakeholders and promulgating the regulations to take that into account. And that's kind of a stated goal for the bill to do that. So there's a little bit of trust that's required, I guess, in a sense.
Thank you. Anything else? Supervisor.
No, just concerned. I'll be eager to see how that plays out.
As I understand it, it's kind of like smog check for trucks.
Correct. Yes.
There's no ongoing kind of check, except there are random enforcement of our truck emission rules at various points along our highways and roads. So this is a more systemized, as I understand it, review of the trucks using our roads and to determine whether or not they have the proper smog control devices. Any further questions? I did ask Philip yesterday. The way this is worded, it's focused on non-gasoline heavy-duty motors. And so my question was, why did they call it non-gasoline? Because now we have CNG trucks, LNG trucks, we have hybrid vehicles that are combinations of battery electric and CNG, and we're seeing a lot more new technology coming out. And so are they thrown in? They're thrown into this definition of non-gasoline heavy-duty trucks. So I thought we should have our staff talk to the author about that and see whether or not that language. I mean, it's obviously focused on diesel trucks. Right. You know, they just haven't said it.
Right.
And so, Philip, go ahead.
We also had technical staff Brian Cho, that can respond partially.
Oh, good. Brian's here.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, Brian Cho, Program Supervisor in Planning and Rules, Fleet Rule Section. Just a brief background on the smog check program itself is they do require the smog check program even for heavy-duty gasoline vehicles. But all the non-gasoline vehicles are exempt from the test requirements under that existing program. So that's how they awarded this new proposed bill to basically require non-gasoline vehicles, which will include definitely the diesel, but as well as some other alternative fuel vehicles, as well, such as CNGs and LPGs. And so that's probably where the non-gasoline language itself is awarded for.
So is there a reason that we should be asking them to exempt the zero-emission vehicles or the low-NOx vehicles? Should we be asking for that, or should we? What is your recommendation on that?
Well, the zero-emission vehicle, probably by nature itself, as a zero tailpipe, would not be required. because it doesn't have basically zero tailpipe emission. So in terms of CNGs and LPGs, that's something that I'm sure that they will be discussing as they are shaping the rule.
Okay.
Isn't it older technology that they're looking at, the CNG and the LNG types of engines?
Yeah, just like the small check program, there'll be, it's not going to be brand new vehicles. It's going to be certain years of age and older, probably. If you're looking at the small check programs, currently was like a 6 years plus, so that'll be something that probably patterned after that as well.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Nasby.
So under smog check, I think we get some fees, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Has there been any discussion of fees generated from this program going to the districts?
There are funds that are being created, and there's not a reference right now for it being used or to be going to the local districts. Right now it's being used for the state program that would be created.
Well, I think with 400,000 trucks operating in our district, we should be getting some of that money that goes on.
Well, we'll go ahead and look at making or author accept some of our amendments. That would be one of them. I think that's a very good point.
Pleasure of the committee, absolutely.
Good thing we know people on ARB.
Okay, yeah, I would suggest that we support it, but we also ask for amendments along the lines that we're discussing here, like that definition of non-gasoline, what's going to be in there, and also the collection of fees, and that the air district gets some, local districts get some of that money. So, anything else that comes up here?
I have a question.
Yeah, Dr. Barker.
We're hearing every third or fourth word that you're saying because it's all choppy.
Oh, really? Okay.
But
so did you hear what the discussion was? Did you hear the word money?
My question. You heard the word the money. I did hear that. My question is, you did say that this bill only deals with non-gasoline vehicles. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Does the bill define the word gasoline?
I think she's
not gasoline, but that's the issue we're discussing is to clarify what do they mean by non-gasoline. What's covered under that? And that's what we want to clarify with the author's office.
Because I look at some of the other technologies that we're developing now, hydrogen, natural gas.
Yes.
Those are vehicles themselves that are going to be operating. We want to make sure that we're not jumping out of the frying pan into the fire by saying that all of these other vehicles now are going to be subject to this particular inspection rule. And we're trying to encourage people to transfer from these old cars and vehicles into something that is new. And unless that is defined, non-gasoline, to be specifically stating that we're not talking about some of these other things, that could be a real serious issue that would serve as a deterrent to people to transfer.
Thank you, and yeah, we agree with that. We were having that discussion here around the table with what is meant by non-gasoline, and would the cleaner vehicles, the new battery electric trucks, the natural gas, low NOx trucks be subject to this? But I think an amendment, I think what we will ask is our staff should be seeking a support with amendments to clarify what non-gasoline means, and to also to clarify if fees are collected, and they will be, that a portion of those fees should go to local air districts to help offset and mitigate this emissions from heavy-duty trucks. So I think what we're going to...
If we pass that, could we also have that with the new language come back before the committee so we'll know exactly what the changes that the author has agreed to really states?
Yeah, I think, we can have our staff report back to us as they work with the author on this bill.
Okay.
So the staff position is support, but I would suggest this position should be support with amendments as we work with the author on this bill. So I'll look for a motion on action for this.
I'll move it as per your statement, Madam Chair, that we support with amendments in the bill itself. Once those amendments done, we'll come back before the committee.
Thank you. Dr. Parker has made the motion. Do I have a second? Is Dr. Parker speaking? Oh, Supervisor Rutherford has seconded the motion. And so I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Dr. Burke?
Aye.
Dr. Parker?
Aye.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
And we have the next item on our agenda is proposed amendments to our state and federal legislative goals.
10 o'clock I have to. At 10 o'clock I have to look for the phone. I got to call in for 2-3 minutes. You can use.
Excuse me,
CC8.
CC8.
Mute on your end. We're hearing everything you're
mute.
saying, so it'd be good to kind of mute over there so we can proceed. Item agenda 4 is amendments to our federal and legislative goals and objectives. These were requests made by Dr. Liu, and so staff has been working with.
This thing is still downloading in 8 minutes.
We'll do this quickly.
Should take that long.
Lisa is giving the report on this.
Excuse me, Lisa. Dr. Parker, you may want to mute your end.
There you go. He just did it.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Dr. Liu had proposed amendments to both our federal and state legislative goals and objectives. His first proposed amendment was to the federal program, and his language is in the attachment 4, and he requested to oppose tax laws or other financial incentive legislation that disproportionately benefits those who manufacture, sell, or use products that significantly increase air pollution within the district. The staff's concern with that proposed amendment was that it was very broad and the application of it would be difficult to properly implement. Therefore, staff suggested alternative language. The staff's alternative language took an existing part of the legislative program and added the words oppose legislation, therefore making it a little bit more forceful and strong. That language itself deals with supporting the Clean Air Act, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and also the state implementation plan. There was correspondence with Dr. Liu, and he did accept the staff's suggested language.
All right. Shall we take these one by one to vote on them, or shall we take them together? I'll ask for maybe Barbara or somebody have
Federal first.
a recommendation on this.
So staff is recommending take them separately?
Separately, okay. So with respect to the first change that is recommended here, are there any comments or discussion on this?
And I did want to make a comment on that one.
Yes,
Manager, which was specifically Supervisor Nelson had inquired regarding the language opposed legislation that conflicts with the district's attainment goals. Did that include legislation that might actually affect the National Ambient Air Quality Standards? And as it turns out, the answer to that question is actually already in the proposed goals. If you see the fourth bullet point underneath the new language, one of the bullet points is to protect science-driven and health-based determinations of national ambient air quality standards. So that would mean that if there was legislation that would seek to change the standards from being based on health impacts and instead have them based on some other factor like economics, that would be something that this policy would oppose. That was already in the existing language, but we didn't realize it at the last committee meeting.
Okay, good. Thank you for that clarification. I do recall that conversation with Supervisor Nelson. Any discussion on this item? Any questions? So I will look for a motion to for action on this particular language.
I'll move the item.
Thank you. Dr. Parker has
I'll
moved
second.
the item, and Dr. Burke has seconded. And may we have a roll call, please?
Dr. Burke?
Yes.
Like they did.
Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
And then we'll move to the final item here from Dr. Liu's recommendations. And Lisa, would you want to explain this one?
This is an additional amendment. This is actually for the state legislative goals and objectives. And he asked to add language which promotes energy efficiency and demand and reliable, cost-effective, clean energy for all consumers. The staff response was that we were supportive of including that additional language to the existing. So the new language would include support legislation that advances the board's energy policy, which promotes energy efficiency, demand reduction, and reliable, cost-effective, and clean energy for all consumers in the district.
Thank you. Any questions on this proposed amendment to our goals? And with that, yes, Dr. Parker?
Can you, we're having problems trying to understand. You said this is an amendment by whom now?
This is Dr. Liu's proposed amendment to our existing goals and objectives, and this would be added to the state goals.
And what's the staff? What is the staff's position on this amendment?
It's support. It's support.
What did you say?
Staff
We
supports.
can't hear you.
Staff's okay with it, Dr. Parker.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I remember, Madam Chair, any time in the past where an individual board member just writes an amendment for concurrence by the district himself or herself. Do you have any recollection of that?
Well, remember that this is goals and objectives, legislative goals and objectives, which, basically the board writes those. I mean, staff writes them for us and we review them and decide, whether we're going to want to adopt those or not. So this truly is a board document. And so one of our board members has suggested a change in that language. So that comes to this committee and then it will go to the entire board. I mean, we can say yay or nay here, and it would go to the entire board for their approval, because ultimately we approve the goals and objectives. The board does that approval, so it seems appropriate. Barbara, do you want to comment on that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay. So
I'm good.
So this was suggested by Dr. Liu, and Dr. Liu and staff worked together on it and suggested this language.
Mine's just all through. Mine's open.
Mic is hot. Dr. Burke, your mic is hot.
So I'm looking for a motion on this particular item, whether the committee wants to accept this change to the goals and objectives for our state goals. And now we can't hear anyone. So, does anyone want to make this motion?
I'm not inclined to make the motion.
So if I could clarify here, what we are actually considering is adopting the proposed state goals and objectives. and with or without Dr. Liu's amendment. So if you're not inclined to support Dr. Liu's amendment, then staff would ask for a motion to support the remainder of the goals, state goals and objectives.
Okay. I need to hear staff request that.
Well, February previously was all the state, federal.
Louder.
Louder. And speak in the mic.
Previously, the federal and state goals and objectives were already approved as a whole. These are after the fact amendments proposed by board members.
I recall.
No, they
So
weren't. We're saying we're not sure that they were previously.
I'll move that.
I think we approved all of them except for that part that we're going to consider at committee.
When we come back, when we come back to committee.
I believe that's true, that we did approve all of them, and now that then Dr. Liu raised the objection, can we add this? So it's back here just to see whether we add
Just for this item.
So Dr. Burke moved what you just said.
What was that?
Okay.
Second.
What is
you
the
just
motion?
said?
So,
Can you repeat it?
Well,
He's seconding my motion to support the staff recommendation without Dr. Liu's amendment.
Okay.
Sound good?
okay, so Dr. Burke has made the motion to support this portion of our state goals without the amended language of Dr. Liu, and Dr. Parker has seconded that motion, so we'll ask for a roll call.
Dr. Burke?
Aye.
Dr. Parker?
Aye.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
No.
Motion passes 3-1.
All right, so we are near the end. Is there any other business to come before the committee? And public comment. Is there anyone in the public that wants to comment on the agenda? Any items? Okay. Any other items that aren't on the agenda? And the next meeting is Friday, May 11th, so we will adjourn this committee meeting until Friday, May 11th. Thank you all.